Welcome back to another episode of Re-Correlated Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Natalie Baker, and we also have Mac back with us in this season. And if you haven't noticed, that's just the two of us tonight. We had a last minute cancellation with a guest, but we're just going to keep going with it. And actually, I know a lot of people probably were like, who the heck is this Gary Gift guy? I've never even heard of him. He is not somebody that anybody would know from cyber. He is actually... when I was a young private in the military, PV2 Baker, I had one NCO that kind of like really took me under his wings and taught me how to be a great leader. And that's who Gary Gift is. So even to this day, whenever I'm in like a hard or tough like leadership predicament, I'll be like, what would Gary Gift do? That's I always amazing. Ask myself that question. So that's who he is. He will be back on. He has promised me that he will come on for a future episode. We'll have to come up with a new topic, or who knows, maybe we will revisit this topic with him. But hopefully we can do him some justice and let him know that his protege has learned his ways.
Absolutely. He's your master Yoda. That's kind of amazing.
Yes, he is. We all have them. So with that being said, Mac, do you want to start with your hot takes on the power of your people-centric leadership?
I am so stoked to get into this. I had an incredible experience earlier this week up in Washington, D.C. at the Uniting Women in Cyber conference. And that was such a cool experience because there were so many amazing leaders. And I think the really fascinating thing is that primarily the speakers and the attendees were women. There were some fantastic men there as well. But I've never been to a con where people were this welcoming and open. And I think that really speaks to the power of like great leaders are looking for active ways to engage with new people, to put other people first. It was an amazing experience to see all these servant leaders out there just excited to connect with peers and with newcomers and with people that might be ahead of them. It really was very cool. So hot take, I think, your power really is your people. I think a lot of us, when we think of leadership roles, we think of acronyms behind our names and we think of clout and prestige. And the very best leaders are really focused on the people on their teams. And I think it's really easy. I know I've fallen into this trap before of thinking like, it's about me, it's about my ability to do X, Y, and Z. And in fact, it's about focusing on enabling other people to do X, Y, and Z. My hot take.
Yeah, I actually, UWIC has a really great con. I'd love going there. I went 2 years, like the past 2 years, like 2 years before this year. I unfortunately couldn't make it this year, but I hope to go back in the future. But it is a really great con for that reason. And lots of, I still have friends people I've connected with through that con, and I still talk to them, and they still they'll watch a podcast episode every now and then and stuff like that, and they'll reach out every so often. So it's really cool, like, because it's so close to me, like location wise, to like have that network there and have that as a venue to go to. So
true.
I love that conference. Do want to give them a shout out. I saw that I was so proud of Mac doing a speaking engagement.
Well, I'm racking them up these days, but I was really lucky to pair with Mandy Satterwhite from Accenture, and we talked a lot about the power of saying yes in creating opportunities in cyber, and also the power of saying no to protect yourself from doing too much stuff. But it was great. Mandy was a super fun co-speaker.
Nice. Well, kudos to you on that. 2 years ago, did you ever think that you'd be in that?
Oh my God, no. I was just trying to figure out what S-bomb stood for. Are you kidding? Natalie, what's an SRG? A surge? Is that a new energy drink? I don't understand. Yeah, it was wild. It was really cool. But again, the power of leadership. I think that if it would have been really easy for you when I was a cyber apprentice to be like, oh, it's about me building my creds as someone leading an apprenticeship program and also delivering on customer work, to like make that a feather in my cap, as opposed to saying, you know what, the best leadership I can show is making sure these people are prepared to be individual contributors. And I will say, Natalie, you've got quite the track record. I think everyone that's come through the GRC apprenticeship program has come through you, and obviously some of your amazing coworkers at Acquia, and everyone is as an FTE and kind of crushing it. So, that's some great leadership right there. Just gonna throw that out there.
Well, thank you. I learned from the best. His name is Gary Gift. He was supposed to be on this episode, but
we'll get him. We'll get Gary in here.
We will get him.
How about your hot take now?
I will continuously call him Gift instead of like Gary. But my hot take is that leaders really do have like a huge responsibility, and with great power comes great responsibility, right? That kind of ordeal, because your impact that you have as a leader on your people on your team can really, make or break somebody's like life or their goals in their careers and where they want to take their career. Like, you could have one conversation that you just took 10, 15 minutes out of your day and sat down with a junior and said like, hey, where do you want to take your career? Like, what do you want to do? You don't just have to do GRC. You can move into the technical space. And then the next thing you know, you have a senior security engineer here, right? Like,
right.
So as a leader, the first thing that you should always care about is taking care of the people that are on your team. It's so many reasons, but they are your greatest asset. Your people are your greatest asset. They will, they will be super loyal if they're taken care of and you fill their cup. And that's your job as a leader, is to create other like future leaders, right? Like my job isn't just to create, somebody on how to do what I do, but it's also how to teach them how to, in the future, don't forget that you have to pay it back too. So it's really some of the best leaders that I have worked under, that I've loved working under, were those that were very of that servant mindset mentality. So brings us to our first like topic, with people being your greatest asset as a leader. Like I think that's like your greatest asset, because they are either going to, they can make you look really, really, really great at what you do, but they can also, if they didn't put as much detail, if you don't care about them as a leader, how can you ask them to care about their work?
100%.
Kind of my take on that.
Something you said I want to come back to really quickly, though, that quick conversation and the positive impact that can have on someone from your team, just the short chat about like, where do you want to go? Are you happy? How are you doing with this? The inverse is true too. And I think that's one of the hardest things. To be a great servant leader in particular, you have to be aware, you said with great power comes great responsibility. And that is so true. A human moment, a bad moment, we all have them. It bears so much more weight, and it can have way more impact if you aren't on point. I think one of the best lessons I've learned, I've definitely learned it the hard way, is, as leaders, and leaders don't have to be like managers, right? They don't have to be VPs. They don't have to be senior directors. Like, I think we can all find ways to be leaders on our teams and our life. And like taking that pause to think about like, this interaction I'm about to have, is it going to be helping the person that I'm having? That doesn't mean every interaction needs to be like, yeah, you're so special. But am I setting this person up for success? Even if this is going to be a hard conversation, is this something that's going to be productive? And I think we're all guilty of having those kind of conversations with our people, with our best assets that are like distracted, that are stressed, that are tired, that are just irritated because, I don't know, you ran out of milk this morning, and they're human. But when we're in positions where we can be leaders, even little things, little comments, little brush asides, a tone, a glance, like all of that can be really negatively impactful too. So there's this great opportunity to have really positive impact on people's lives. But then there's also this responsibility to hold yourself to a really high standard and say, if I'm putting anything out there, and I know that there's the privilege of a power dynamic, I have the privileged position in a power dynamic, is what I'm putting into the universe ultimately going to serve the person who it's directed at? And that's a really hard thing to do. And the best leaders that I've ever worked with do a really good job of like being superhuman, but also being superhumanly conscientious about the impact that their comments and their affects can have, because something really small might be something that someone thinks about again and again and again and again. And the way positive encouragement can jumpstart a career and launch someone, the wrong negative stuff can have the inverse effect. So it's a tough road to hoe, right? Like not everyone wants this. That. It's hard.
I love that you say that, because I always used to tell people, like, I am a byproduct of the best leaders I've ever worked for, and also the worst leaders I've ever worked for, because those leaders that I was like, I never want, when I become a leader, I'm not that. That's not the goal. I use that as like, if I ever do something like this, like that's on my list of my like mental list of like, if you ever do something like this, you need to go apologize right now. And I think that's the thing that like great leaders, they have that introspection. And like, here's the thing is like, I have Gary that I can go to, like, and I can tell him like a situation, whenever I do have, like, I get into those qualms where like, I just don't know how to handle this and I don't want to fuck it up. So like, I need somebody else's perspective, and he will tear into me and be like, well, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you try this? Did you try this? Did you try that? And like at a certain point, then he's like, well, then you've done everything that you can do as a leader. And that's, you just have to let the cards fall where they may. But he will like literally tear me apart. So like sometimes that's what you need though. It's like, that's why I'm so very, like, I'm very self-aware of myself. It's just because I've had somebody there that like, anytime I get into like a situation, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to handle this the wrong way, but I don't want to be too soft and make people think that they can walk all over me because I'm a cool leader, you know, like I'm kind of chill, like, but at the same time, like I kind of have to still have that like a little bit of authority to where they know that when I say we need to do this, we need to get it done. But yeah, so I really love that we're talking about like introspection, really getting to know everything about like what makes a great leader just in general. Because it all starts with focusing on your people rather than yourself. And that's the hardest part of going from an individual contributor, is like your success was your success, right? Like that's the only thing that really mattered. And really, when you go into a leadership position, it now is your team's success is your success. And you really have to remember that.
You've uncovered something really core to like the challenge, I think, is we tend to elevate our leaders because they're exceptional individual contributors, right? If you're the lead security engineer on your team, you're going to, the way that we tend to build teams is we elevate those people and we give them more and more responsibility. And eventually that responsibility becomes responsibility over their team, which is great with the right person. How many times do we see, like, let's take it away from the cyber example. How many times do we see like professional athletes that are like, oh, I was a great basketball player, so I can also be a great coach, because they're the same. And there's some great basketball players that are some great coaches now, you know, but there's plenty that like F around and find out, right? Like coaching is not playing, leading is not contributing. They're different. But the challenge is we often look to our top contributors, our top performers, to be leaders. And those are sometimes, and often, those are not the same skill sets. And often what makes a great individual contributor: hyper focus on what you do, super detail oriented, like blinders are on. You can be like, you know, you can dial down on one task. You know, in the world of sports, it's like, I want the ball. I want to be the superstar. How many times do you hear, again, I'm going to use a basketball analogy. We're getting close to NBA season. Like, I want that shot. Like, at the buzzer, I want to be the gal, you know, with the line. It's Caitlin Clark, right? Caitlin Clark's amazing. Can Caitlin Clark coach? I mean, probably, because she's Caitlin Clark. I'm pretty sure she could also code better than I can. Like, she's just a stud. But, you know, that mindset of like, I want to be the person, that's not good leadership. The best leaders I've worked with, like, delegate. You know, they say, hey, you're the person. You are so good at this. Like, I need you to go do this because the team, that's going to be helpful for us. Like, and I trust you to do that on your own. I don't know how many times in leadership positions, I've micromanaged my team because it's like, well, I want you to do it exactly this way. Instead of saying, hey, this person's fantastic at what they do. It might not be the way that I do it, but I trust them to like get the job done for us. So like, go be empowered to do it however you think it needs to be done. That's really tough. So having that, you said introspection, having that self-knowledge to say like, what got me to this point in my career as an individual contributor will not necessarily get me to like this point in my career as a leader or a manager. I think that switch, that mental switch often doesn't get flipped. And so we see brilliant people that can do the thing really well, that struggle to teach and guide and motivate others to do the thing. Because at the end of the day, like if I'm one individual contributor, I'm not going to be as prolific as 5 great individual contributors. But having the presence of mind to say, okay, I can do that myself and struggle, or I can guide 5 other people to do it, and ultimately we can come out ahead. That's a tough deal, but I don't think the process of elevating leaders lends itself to that transition. I don't know, Natalie, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that we are very lucky in our industry because a lot of times, and really how I feel about it is that as a leader, you should never ask your people to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. And let me tell you something, Gary Geth, I was going to tell this really great story about like this one time where I had to go and like we had to go take a bunch of different like a room full of like paper to a shredder, and they had to be sorted and all this, and there were staples had to be pulled out of it. Military like trash day, basically, duty is what I got put on. And he had always told me like, I'll never ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself. I'll never ask you to do something I wouldn't do myself. So I made him like be true to that. And I was like, bro, you need to come help us with this. And he did. He like helped us go through all these boxes. So I think it doesn't matter. Like, even though you're not the individual contributor as much anymore, there's still going to be times where you're contributing. Like, don't think that I'm not still doing my own contribution, but then I go above and beyond by mentoring others too. So like, I think there's still room for some of that individual contribution, but your main contribution, your main focus is to be pouring into people so that they're taking those bits and nuggets. Because like, you can be one great individual contributor, but can you make 5 great individual contributors underneath of you? Can you turn those individual contributors and mentor them into becoming these great leaders that others, that they go on to their next hop in life and their next job, their next career move, and they then are able to go and make that positive impact on that company and help influence other people's lives as well in a positive way.
Totally.
So with that, I think the number one thing that a lot of people forget is like, yeah, we do have, like, as a leader, you do have to kind of like have that that threshold, that line where like you're in a professional setting and everything, right? But like, you do still have to get to know your people. I think that's a super important aspect that a lot of times gets lost out, especially in like military, leadership. I saw that a lot because like, you know, NCOs aren't supposed to fraternize with junior enlisted. And like now you have fraternization charges that like you could literally be charged with a crime for fraternizing across ranks like that and stuff. And it was like one of those things that like Gift just never cared about. He was just like, yeah, that's a stupid rule, and would just like be like, no. And I always respected him a lot because he got to know us to where like if I was like, hey, Gift, like Sergeant Gift, I'm just not feeling well today, like I feel like garbage, or like or even like if I wasn't, you know, always performing to my best level and he knew it, he usually could tell when something was wrong just because he took the time to get to know me and know who I was as a person, know what drove me. And some people need to be like, you know, in the limelight all the time, need to be praised all the time. And then you have other people on your team that are like, no, I just want to know that I'm doing good, solid work and that I'm doing a good job. And I don't want to be in the limelight. Like I want out of that limelight. And really getting to know like what motivates your people to do their best work, but also, when they've done that, how can you use their personality to tell you like how to actually reward them for that work that they've done, and praise them in a way that makes sense to their personality type, right?
Totally. You can only lead if you know them really well.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
Yeah. So I think that that's like a really crucial step, is getting to know people and understanding like what it is that makes them unique, and ask them questions. Like, you don't have to get like deep into their personal lives, but like, asking them like general life questions. And taking a genuine interest in them is like the first step to being a really people-centric leader.
Totally. And I love the word genuine. I think that we're all going to approach leadership in really different ways because we're all really different people. I think if you're showing genuine interest, to your point, I think it goes a really long way. I think people can see that and they can feel that, especially if it's authentic to who you are as a person. That feels really great, and you can feel seen as someone on that team, and then it creates space for you to kind of bring your genuine, authentic self as well. So I think it's a really cool thought.
Yeah. So how do you show value? Like, how do you show people that you value them?
Oh man, that's such a great question, right? We've all decided on LinkedIn that it's not pizza parties, right? We've figured out that it's not pizza parties.
Sometimes it is raises when people deserve raises.
Definitely. I mean, the money talks, like manja. We want the dollar signs. I think it's time, especially as I've gotten into this space, and we work for a fully remote company. We don't see each other a lot. Most of our interaction with our teams and our leaders is on Slack. It's on email. I had a leader and a coworker asked me yesterday to block as much time as I wanted on his calendar this afternoon to work on a really hard engineering project that's been tripping me up. And this person is very busy. They have a full slate within their company and with their customer delivery. And being told like I could have as much of their time as I needed to co-work through some like kind of co-engineering stuff was like, what? Are you serious? And I was like, 3 hours. And then I did an hour and a half. And it was incredible. And that is, I think, showing that your team's endeavors and their struggles are meaningful to you, and that you are willing to gift them your time, especially in this remote kind of disparate world. It's like the best thing that you can give your team. And there's no better way to say, like, you matter, you're valuable, like your struggle, I see it and I value it and I value you and I want you to learn. Like that is, it's like the best thing that you could do. So yes, raises, the occasional pizza party. I love a gift box. But the day-to-day, the thing that really matters, what's going to keep you showing up to your keyboard and, to your point, like doing great work so it reflects well on your team, is feeling like you are important enough to warrant more than just like a 15-minute daily stand-up and then like, I'm busy, like really showing up and being present, especially in a remote world, is huge. What are your thoughts, Natalie?
My thoughts would be, I think it's more so investment. So equal investment. So like, here's the thing. Whenever I get hired at a company, one of my questions that I always ask is, I always say, like, I invest hard in companies that I work at, because I do. I invest time. I invest my efforts, my energy, my like neuropathic ways of like, just like being very anal about certain things, like details, attention to detail. Like, I will invest all this into your company. So I need you to invest equally into me. Like, how do you invest in your employees? That's always a question that I ask. And it's because it's not just time. It's also like when we look at our company, and our company is actually just one of the greatest companies I've ever worked for. So
it
like,
honestly is.
I think everybody at our company feels that way too. So like when I look at our company, it's like our benefits are great. Our, it's everything. They invest in our education. by giving us an education fund. They invest in us in making sure that, you know, if there's a situation with like a natural disaster, I've seen them like go out and just like, you know, get things taken care of so that you can get back online and do your work. But you're more than just like a number to them. It's like you're a whole person to them and they show you that by all the ways that they invest in you. So like at the end of the day, I feel like it's the equal investment. And that's really, to me, that's the greatest way that a company could show that they value me, is the equal investment. And you're asking me to invest a lot of my knowledge, my heart, my grit, my skills into this company. How are you also investing into me? And so time is also part of it too. Like, you know, having the ability to just like go put a one-on-one on my boss's calendar, right? Like my leader's calendar, and just being like, yeah, he'll show up. I'll talk to him then.
That's huge.
And just being able to do that, like that's phenomenal. So, but I think it depends on the person too. Like every person feels that slightly differently about what they want and how they feel valued, right? Like
we're all motivated by different things, for sure.
Yeah. So I think like you have to also take into account the kind of person that you are leading and dealing with, because like if they're not seeing that value, like if you're not showing them, if you're not teaching them with their love language, like that's how they feel loved, right? That's how they feel loved and fulfilled and valued and all that. So you also have to like kind of curtail it to each individual person, which is like when I get into some of these leadership talks with like juniors and stuff like that, like it's not always a group, like sometimes it will be a group conversation, but like usually it's very one-on-one, very specific questions are being asked. And I'll be like, here's my take on it. Like you can go ask other leaders in the company too, because you should never just take one person's opinion and be like, yes, that's the grain of gold I go with. Yes. Like you should be formulating it from others in the company too. So, but yeah, valuing people, knowing who they are so that you can actually value them in a way that will fill them up and reward them internally.
It might be a pizza party, you know? I mean, you never know. You might have that person where it's like, it's pepperoni. That is my love language, you know?
Yeah.
Just kidding. No one wants a pizza party. Except for 8-year-olds. But, you know, but I think, again, you've uncovered something really important, Natalie, which is this idea of like, we all think of a leadership role as being like a destination. Like I am going to get in, I'm going to grind, and I'm going to like rise up to be like a principal, and then I'm going to be a senior, and then I'm going to be like a manager senior. And that's like, that is a level that I'm going to attain as an employee. And what we've uncovered is you have to make time. You have to know your people, what motivates them. You have to know their love languages, like how you can show that they're valued back to them, to mirror that value back. You know, you've got to be actively kind of evaluating the feedback that you're giving, both positive and negative, and making sure that it's got intent behind it. That is really different than like slinging Python and like crushing policy and procedure docs as an individual contributor, right? Like it's a huge undertaking. And to your point, like you've got to be able to get in there and like roll up your sleeves and do the work along with your team. But we ask our leaders to do a lot of stuff. And it's not just like a sparkly stage that you get to because you kicked ass. It's something that is an additional workload, an additional challenge that you have to be willing to take on, you know?
Yeah. And you have to have I mean, anybody can learn how to lead, right? Like anybody can learn how to lead and be a good leader. Like anybody can, but like you kind of have to, some of the best leaders, they just are naturally inclined with that skill set. To them, it's just second nature to value people and to make sure that people know that they're valued, and to get to know people, because that's just who they are. And then like others like me who like are like the most awkward people ever and are just very introverted, are like, okay, I have to like force myself to go get to know people.
Ooh, wait, time out. I've got to jump in there because I think that, in fact, your introverted nature, because Nat, you are an introvert, and that's fine. As an extrovert, I see you. I think sometimes you're an empath, right? Like you're someone that picks up on emotions and picks up on states. And yes, that is put through an introvert package, but again, I feel like I'm like beating a dead horse here, but I think we visualize leaders in a way that is not always accurate to what makes great leaders. Leaders are often placed in positions when they have to be extroverts. They have to talk. They have to rah, do all that stuff. Can't tell you how many times at UWIC 2 days ago, people identified as extroverted introverts, people that had learned to get on stage and smile and share and meet a bunch of new people. And then you'd see those same like sparkling women like turn a corner and be like, my social battery's dead. I need 15 minutes. I'm going to go hide in the bathroom, and like, that's because I think that especially as women, like empathy and being able to like be quiet enough and still enough to create space again for our teams to show up and show us who they are and tell us what they need. Like silence can be one of the best things as a leader to deploy and say like, I'm not going to fill this awkward silence. If I think that you're going to get there, I'm going to give you the space. And I'm going to give you the time to say the thing that you need to say so that hopefully we can work together on solutioning. And I think as extroverts, it's really easy to be like, here I am on the stage doing the thing. And that's not leadership. It's what we associate with leadership, but it's not leadership. So I'm going to call you out. Introverts make great leaders. You're proof positive. But I think that there is, leadership can't, to kind of bring my little piece full circle here, leadership can absolutely be learned. It's not a personality trait. And, we know great leaders that have those like presidential personalities where they're like, this is me. I am so suave and I'm charming, but that is not actually leadership. That's showmanship. And great leaders are often great showmen, but to be a great leader, you don't need to be that way. You need to be focused on your people and you need to be taking the time, investing in them and showing them value. And that can look 100,000 different ways. And it's really easy, especially like when I was younger, falling into the gap of like, I have to be this certain way and I have to look and act and dress a certain way to be a leader. And that's like the 10%, the last little window dressing that you got to figure out, right? The 90% of what actually makes a great leader is what you're doing and how you're making people feel and how you're building people up and empowering them and creating space for them. And you do not have to be an extrovert to do that well.
Yeah.
Extrovert out.
It is definitely, there are times you learn as an introverted leader, like there are times and places where you have to like do the extroverting thing and you have to at least try to extrovert as best as you can. And like sometimes, let me tell you, I'm like the most awkward person ever too. So it's just like a great personality trait that goes hand in hand with it. So I'm like, I'll sit here and just be silent and just be like, okay, I showed up to make this situation more awkward. But at the same time, I'm very upfront and honest with people about it when they first meet me so that they are like, okay, so she is weird. It's not just me thinking she's weird. Like she's weird. Yeah. Okay. She acknowledges it.
Our weirdness is giving other people space to also be weird. There'd be nothing worse than like showing up to a meeting and feeling like the most weird person in the room. So I like to think that every time that I'm like, okay, that was a little quirky. I'm like, someone just felt a little bit more comfortable. Ideal. Great. Mission accomplished.
So, so like, not just like, valuing your people, but then you also have to take care of them. Cause like, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all people, we're all humans. And like, you're not going to do your best work if you're stressed out. You're not going to do your best work if you're not feeling well. You're not going to like, how can I ask you as a person to perform at a high standard or, like a standard that I've set that I want on the team how can I ask you to perform that if you're not feeling your best and stuff like that? So like, you need to like not just value people and get to know them, but then once you do realize that like, hey, maybe this person just needs a damn day off. Like I know for a fact that Hollis, because Hollis used to be on my last team, and I remember we got like partway through the year and he didn't have any PTO scheduled, and I was like, bro, what you need are you not taking PTO? Like, what? Use it or lose it, bro. Go take your damn PTO. And he was like, oh, well, I thought I had to acquire it because like, and I was like, no, at the beginning of the year, you acquire all the PTO that you have for the year. And then you just have the year to use it because that's how that ran there. And he was like, oh, I thought I had to acquire it. So I didn't think I had enough time to like take any time off. And I was like, go use your PTO. But like, that's again, taking care of them, recognizing that like, hey, we're halfway through the year and you don't have any PTO on the calendar. Like, are you needing I think you need some PTO time soon. Like, can you please schedule something?
Totally.
Because if they're not
oh, sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No. I think that's huge. Kind of saving them from themselves, like I think we tend to be worker bees. I think there's also like the psychological safety component that comes into creating an environment people can work in. And I've seen that kind of play out a couple different ways. I've had some amazing, like not even top level leaders, but like project leaders that are like violently aggressive about defending team time and are like, I see that you've been added in this channel asking you a question. Would you like that to be directed in a different space so that it isn't so directly directed at you? Would you like help? Like, would you like me to tell this person to piss off and kick rocks until you're ready? Like, and it was so great to know that this person was going to swoop in and be like, I know that you've got 12 story points this sprint already. Do you need me to like smoke and mirrors and get this kick to the next sprint, or just tell this person to find somebody else? Like, I'm ready to defend you. And that created this space where you weren't being like, I'm drowning. You would commit to exactly what you wanted. And this person would say, if you would like this, because it's something that you want to do, I'm happy to like unlock you to do it. But if you don't, let me be the bad guy for like protecting you from that. And I loved that. And to that same end, that's like that's like the day to day. Then the scary part comes in where it's like, what about when the poo hits the fan?
You always find out how somebody is as a leader and how good they are as a leader when shit hits fan.
Yeah, we know someone who just recently had a leader step into a really sticky situation and just like shut it down in like a very, very definitive way to protect their team. And that's the kind of thing that we have to do. Like, that's not the team member's responsibility. That's the leader's responsibility. Like, ultimately, that tough situation needed to be handled by the leader. And we saw that leader do it. And it was like, wow, that is what it takes. And like that team walked away. Yeah, that team walked away being like, thank goodness I work here. Thank goodness I've got that leader that is going to protect me. And that is just really cool. And I think that's something that we, again, my refrain in this is like, let's build the right kind of leaders in the right way so that they are protecting and valuing their people. We think of bosses and coaches and like CEOs, like in every movie, it's like the big yelly guy, typically guy, sometimes it's the super bitchy boss lady. And often they have a heart of gold at the end of the film, but we see leadership projected in one very specific way. And it's brusque and it creates stress and it creates tension. And I'm not sure that that's the way to do it. And I've tried it. I've tried to be like the bad wolf and being like, oh, if they hate me, it's fine. At least they'll be united in their hate. Like that's not the way. Like to quote Star Wars,
that's so toxic.
That's not it, right? But I think we're evolving away from that, and it's so important to say, there's a better way. And it's our job to put ourselves in front of like the threat, put ourselves in front of the burden, if that's overworking or if that's like a toxic negative situation, which is shut down for our teams. It's the leader's responsibility to like be the Secret Service agent diving in front of the president, you know?
Yeah.
And it's
no,
easy
it
to think that
is.
our team is supposed to be diving in front of us because we're the special ones. And again, it's a service leader thing.
You always hear the term like shit rolls downhill, but like when
Yep.
you have a solid leader that will be like, oh hell no, the shit sauce right here. Like it's not
It's
rolling
not getting
down
to you. I will
like you're just
swim
like,
in shit
oh,
before I let it get to my
thank
team, you know?
God. Yeah, you're just like, oh, thank God, because if I had to deal with that and be the individual there, that's not your team's job. That's your job as the leader is to get in front of it and to be like, no, the buck stops with me. Like sometimes you are taking accountability for something that wasn't your mess up, right? Like it wasn't even all your mess up, but you're still going to take accountability for it because that's what leaders do. That's what leaders do.
Super hard lesson to learn, though. Super hard lesson to learn. It's not what we're shown in media.
Not a fun lesson.
It's not something that you naturally do as an individual contributor. And it's a really, it's a really tough one. You know, it's a really hard lesson to learn, and it's a critical one. It's maybe the most critical one.
Yeah, and at the same time, Gift as my leader in the Army, he had this, like, he would tell me it was his Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So I call it the Natalie versus Sergeant B effect, right? Like, so you know, 90% of the time you're seeing the Natalie side of me, right? Like chill and everything. Every now and then, like I have the Sergeant B side of me has to come out and I'm like, we have to get this done by this deadline. And I don't care. I don't want excuses. Like, and I really have to hammer down on somebody, you know, a little bit because like maybe their work wasn't up to par or maybe this or that, you know, and they still like, you still have to make sure that you respect them in that situation. And there have been times even where like, I mean, when we talk about self-reflection, like there have been times where I've had these conversations. I thought them out in advance because I never had these conversations on a whim. It is like, you know, it is usually a very planned conversation for me so that I know what points I need to make. And like, I've had the time to think it through so that I'm not like just berating somebody. Right.
Sure.
But, so, you know, but at the same time, it still has to be that conversation sometimes still has to be had, and you still have to have that heart to heart. And like I call them come to Jesus meetings. Like we're coming to Jesus on this one. We don't have to agree, but we can agree to disagree, and we are going to move forward, and we're going to work our asses off still, right? Like, and I've had those conversations, and I've had those conversations go really well. Sometimes your team needs to know that you're not a pushover, especially if you're like kind of like just a chill, like, yeah, I'm not a micromanager. Like I don't like being micromanaged, so I don't want to micromanage other people. If I have to micromanage you, that's a problem to me. Like that's a bigger problem that we need to work on. Because I'm not micromanaging people because that just drives, it's ineffective and it drives me insane. So like you know, maybe we have to get you up to speed with like how to do something, you know, and we need to break down like how to create a document or something like that. Like, I've had those, but it's really like when you have those moments, if you've truly taken care of your people when push comes to shove, or when, you know, they were at their weakest, or, you know, they were in a bad spot, those type of conversations go quite differently because your team just has a whole different level of respect for you. They see everything that you've done to help them out. And they're like, okay, maybe it is a me time to this is a me problem. I need to fix my own problem. Like, let me fix my shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You know, I think 100% being a leader is not always about like being nice, for sure. It's about making sure that if you are having a difficult conversation, if you're having a conversation that's going to challenge someone by making them feel, or hopefully it's not making them feel, right? Like challenging someone to make them see or acknowledge or confront a shortcoming, that has to be done, to your point, in like a very considered way. Like, is this negative conversation going to result in a path towards improvement, right? Like it's the concept behind a PIP, although PIPs are never like, they're never done in the right way, but it's the concept of like, this isn't right. This is what we need you to do to get it right. And we want you to feel empowered to do those things so that you can contribute the way that we want you to contribute. so often those conversations are so fraught with negative emotion and disappointment as a leader because your team member is not doing what you want them to do. And it's really easy for that to be like a frustrated, angry place. And then if you put in any kind of interpersonal dynamics where there's pushback, those can elevate really quickly. And again, the burden of a leader, you've got to make sure that negative, constructive, challenging feedback is incredibly tightly constrained, and then it doesn't go to this emotional place, because once it goes to an emotional place, it's a lose-lose for you. And I think it's something that new leaders, young leaders, and I've been guilty of this in the past, like really struggle with is letting that emotion creep in and not keeping in mind that it's not about you. It's about your team.
Yeah.
And it's about your people. And your job in this tough leadership moment is not to defend your leadership position. It's to use your leadership position as a tool for your team member to write their path and excel. And then, hopefully that works, right? Like we've all also been in situations where we've had people on the team where it's obviously not going to work. And that's the next topic, is like, what do you do when it gets really bad as a leader? But ultimately, like, we have to be those servant leaders that put our team first. And it's not something that we're teaching leaders, I don't think, very effectively before they become leaders.
Yeah.
And which is why this conversation is so great.
Yeah. And I think that's like why there's a lot of things, like we never teach anybody anything about leadership before they become leaders. And then they just like are thrown into it. Like 9 times out of 10, like most people have never gone through like any kind of like leadership school, unless you were in the military, because the military, they have whole leadership schools. And as you move up the ranks, like you are promoted up through, you're going to the next leadership school and the next leadership school. And that's how you actually like end up eventually getting promotion.
Totally. And that's a very specific brand of leadership too. Like that's a very specific track of how leadership works.
It's not always right either, right? Because like a lot of times there's a lot of things in the military, and don't get me wrong, I'm very proud of my service. I'm very proud of everybody who has
Thank you for your service, Natalie.
And done that. But like sometimes the military can be very toxic at times. And some of the things that they train you to do are like the most toxic thing ever. Like I remember going to WLC, and I was which is our warrior leadership course. It's your first level warrior leadership course. I had a permanent profile, and I ended up graduating with commandant's list because like I just went around and helped everybody else pass all their shit and make sure that they were taken care of, that everybody on my team was taken care of. Right. Mm-hmm. And so like when we were out in the field, like I was running around like in the rain with like a crazy person. Like I had to run back or something. Somebody had left something back behind, and I was like, hey, we got to go get that. And like we did. And then we came back, and I forget exactly what happened, but there was, just taking care of those people. At the end of the day, I ended up making commandant's list, which is very impossible to do when you have a permanent profile in the military. I made commandant's list graduating a school on a permanent profile, because your PT score can only be like a 180, which is like the bare minimum, instead of being on like the extended scale. So I had like the bare minimum PT score that you could have, which usually detracts, but every single person in my class, like we had a class vote, and like the 2 people who ended up making commandant's list came down to the class vote, who helped out everybody else in that team better. Like the
most. Talk about servant leadership.
Like that's if you were in that situation, like you were there and like you were like struggling with something, I remember telling the one kid, I was like, well, the easiest way to pass these tests, if you're really just really terrible at taking tests, is like search the answers in the regulations, because they let you have the regulations in front of you. It's not like you have to memorize it. Just search the answers that they give you and then just read the text. It's word for word. So like, just search it.
Think smarter, like, not harder. I love that.
So yeah, definitely told him how to pass the test, but the wrong way. But whatever, he passed. So
hey, you passed the test, and he probably learned something. So at the end of the day, who's to say that's the wrong way? Probably the Army, but whatever.
Probably. But like, hey, I made commandant's list. It's fine.
Yeah, there we go. Outcome motivated.
self-reflection also, like, I mean, I know there was time when you were on my team for a little bit, right? And
Absolutely.
I remember, and it happens a lot when you, especially if you're somebody who trains a lot of entry-level talent, because there will be times where you're just like, I don't know what to tell you. Just go fucking do this. Like,
Sure.
but like it comes off the wrong way. And you had asked, like, well, how would I know what to put in a plan document if I had never written one? And I was like, well, you would read one like from somebody else, and like I'm sure you would have read one at some point, and you were like, but what if you never read one? And I was like, well, then you go read one. And it was like we had that conversation.
Where do I find one? This is hard.
Yeah, I kind of got a little like pointed with you, and I remember like later that night, I was like, Natalie, because I always reflect every day on like, how did I do as a leader? At the end of the day, that's one of the things that's like, how did I do leading my team today? Was I successful as a leader or not? And then, you know, from there, I find and target things that I need to work on as a leader to be a better leader, right? So I remember coming back to you like the next day and being like, Mac, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get a little snippy with you yesterday, but
I can take it. We know it's thick skin.
Well, yes, but it's still the right thing to do because I was wrong. As a leader, I should never have gotten there, right? So sometimes you have to really like know that, yes, you can make mistakes as a leader, but you also have to fucking apologize for those mistakes, right? Like if you have done something that has like, you know, put somebody down or, you know, whatever, be a human and just go apologize for it, because that can solve so many problems as well in leadership. Just like a little bit of self-reflection at the end of the day, ask yourself, what did I do great as a leader? What could I improve on as a leader? And then work towards those goals every day.
I love that idea, Natalie. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. What do you do for self-reflection?
Oh man, you know, I think just that the same way that you're saying, you know, like being mindful of how you're communicating. And it's something that I've really worked on. I think it's really easy to get really outcome oriented, especially in a leadership role, because we've got to remember we're talking about leadership like it's really easy to be just human focused. But our leaders of teams are also have leaders, and they're being told often, and they're being told like, this is the outcome. You know, you needed me to get a policy and procedure draft done so that we could move on to the next step because we were told that X, Y, and Z needed to happen for a customer and yada, yada, yada. And that there's a trickle down effect. It'd be really easy. I mean, not easy, but the process would be much easier if the only goal was to sit around and focus on, you know, the folks and are they evolving the way that they need to, and that the only goal is making sure that they turn into the cyber professionals we need them to be. Often there are deadlines for customer delivery, there are budgets that have to be met, we've got, you know, contentious intra-team dynamics. I mean, there's all these other things. I think it's really easy to, like I said, be kind of outcome oriented and be like, you know what, just figure it out because we have to get this done. And that is a really easy trap to fall into. And I think you have to be cognizant of those things. But I think to bring it back to mindfulness, you've got to be mindful of like, is that my stress? Like, I am the person that is responsible for meeting a deadline. I am the person that is responsible for a deliverable. The buck stops with me as the leader of this team. Am I letting the pressure that I feel color my interaction with this person who is not responsible, you know, is not the Johnny on the spot, is not where the buck stops for the project getting done? Especially, I mean, if it's a lead dev and it's like, you know, lady, we got to get this from you, like you're our slowdown, like that's where you have those challenging conversations. But ultimately, if it's just like the outside pressures are coming in and they're changing the way that you should be interacting with your team members, having the introspection, the mindfulness to say like, that's my shit. I've got to take off that shit backpack and put it on the shelf before I have a conversation with someone that doesn't need all that weight coming down on them, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a really hard thing to do. So I think it's taking a beat. Something that I used to do a lot when I was younger is like try to get an answer right now and feel like I had to have a solution immediately or I had to have a conversation immediately. And honestly, like taking the time to say, you know what, I'm gonna circle back to this. I'm gonna go downstairs, I'm gonna get a glass of water, and I'm gonna think on this, or I'm not going to think on it. I'm just going to let it sit for a second and I'm going to come back to it and see if I can see it in a different way, has been incredibly impactful. And I can remember hearing that when I was young and being like, that's bullshit. They're just avoiding the conversation, and now I'm like, oh man, that was so wise. Like, absolutely. Like, press pause, take a beat, count to 10, like whatever it takes. Those are all kind of like, I don't know, they seem kind of cheesy, but they are incredible because, again, to bring it back to where we started, the positive and negative feedback you give your team, it carries way more weight than it sometimes even should. So you've got to be very cognizant that you are using a scalpel when you need to use a scalpel and using a hammer when you need to use a hammer, and not using a sledgehammer in either of those contexts. And that's hard. That's really, really tough.
Yeah.
So taking the space and time has been something that has worked really well for me to make sure that I am selecting the appropriate communication tool to serve the person I'm talking to.
Well, and also, like, for me, it's just putting myself in their shoe. I was a junior not that long ago. So, like, how would I feel if, as the junior, my leader came to me and said, this is garbage. I'm not telling you why it's garbage. It's just garbage. Bye. And then just like left. And you're like, well, that's not freaking helpful at all. Like, that's not constructive. No. Like, so like coming back from that focus of like, how would I feel as the junior if I was in that situation and I was on their side, and kind of putting myself in their shoes so that I can see their perspective as well. And then coming to the conversation with both perspectives in mind, so that, like, which is why I think I'm a very fair leader. Like, when we have conversations that are difficult, like, what I bring up is very fair points to be brought up. But there's also a way for you to, like, very key goals written out of like how we can improve upon those and make those better, and what we can do to make it better.
Totally.
But then you also don't just like, it doesn't end there, because like you can self-reflect all you want. I'm an overthinker. So like, I'll just think around in circles and like walk around in circles in my house. And like, I swear to God, like my Steps app is like, what are you doing, lady? You're pacing back and forth. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. But, you also have to solicit feedback from your juniors, right? Like, that's where you're going to get your best feedback ever. And here's the thing is, you have to ask questions, because they will always be like, oh, you're great. As long as you're not a jerk, they're going to be like, oh no, you're a great leader. You're a great leader, blah, 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 blah. Even if you are a jerk, they might still tell you to your face that you're a great leader, right? So you have to ask them questions in a way that, like, what could I do better? What would make you feel more supported if I did this, like, as your leader? Like, what is something you feel is missing that I need to improve on?
Yeah, I love that. I just, to interject, it's not all about soliciting feedback from juniors either, because of that power dynamic that you're referencing. I think the best leaders that I know are really comfortable, like, and have really close-knit networks where they're constantly soliciting feedback and advice, and from across the board, from above them, from lateral, from below, and getting that 360-degree picture. If all you're doing is going to your juniors and saying, like, am I doing a good job? And I love what you're saying about like staging those questions so that they create space for legitimate and valuable feedback, but making sure that you're not just asking those people, that you do have a skewed power dynamic. It's not 100% fair just to ask them. You've got to solicit feedback from all over the place.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I value my team's opinions more than I value my seniors. Not that I don't value my seniors' opinions. I'm sorry if my senior is watching right now. One of them are watching it at all. Like, it's just not that I don't value your opinion. I value the feedback from my team, because they are the ones that are in the trenches with me, right? Like, from day to day. So like,
and I love that. I just think that there's a dynamic that's different, like a junior on your team is always going to give you, there's going to be confirmation bias from your juniors. Like, if you get a 3 from a junior, it's a 0.
Yeah.
like
No. So like I've had it where I've asked the question, like, what do you feel I could do to make you more successful in your career goals, for instance? And
Sure.
someone that two of my juniors like literally tried to tell me the exact same thing, like things that I already do that are great. And I was like, okay, let's stop here. Like, it's time to get real with me, because like, I know I'm not a perfect leader. Nobody is. I know there's things that I probably could do to help you out that would be very specific to helping you that you haven't told me. Like, and I will like literally say, all you've told me is what I currently do that you like. Now tell me what I don't do that you need me to do to help you get to where you want to be at. And that has sparked like, but you do have to be like, if you're the kind of person that will just take the compliment and be like, okay, yeah, that's good for me. Like, check the box. I just got my review. Then that's one thing. But like, I specifically ask them what I'm doing wrong in their perspective and where they want me to be better at, so that I can be better for them, right? Because they're the people that have to deal with me. So
love that.
So you do have to sometimes like really make sure that they know, like, no. And then I had another junior I asked the same question to, and immediately came up back with like a really great response. And I was like, you know what? Yep, we're good. We'll find ways to make that happen for you, dude. Let's do it. And he was like, thanks, so like, but awesome. When you do get the feedback where they're just like trying to kind of like kiss your rear end, you're just like, no, that's not what I'm looking for here. I know I do a lot of great things, but like, what do I do wrong? What do I need to do better? How can I help you better?
That's awesome.
And really making them like kind of tease that out in their mind. So it is sometimes like some people will just accept the surface level, and then if you wanted to really go deep into it, you could just start asking very pointed questions of like, no, what do I do? But what do I need to be better at? And eventually they kind of will, like, especially if you've taken the time to get to know your people and they know that you value them and that they know that you respect their opinion, they don't tend to have a long, like, it didn't take a long time for either of the other two juniors to come back with like something I could do better on either. So sure. Like,
you created that safety for them to come back with legitimate feedback, which is awesome.
Yeah. So like, if you foster the right environment from the get-go and you're not toxic, I mean, here we are. You could just have these real feedback. But I agree, like getting from all levels, getting feedback is important. I truly know that like, if I'm doing something wrong as a junior or as a senior for my junior, I need to know before, it becomes a bigger problem.
Totally.
So, yeah. I mean, we are close to
We blew through that hour. Look at us.
I know.
Just the two of us. Holding it down.
Two of us. Holding down the fort. So final thoughts back, and then I'll give mine, and then we can kind of wrap up.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna harp back down on, if you've been elevated into a leadership position, have the perspective to really look at what's the edict? Like, what's your objective as a leader? And how do you need to change the way that you behave and that you operate, potentially from how you got that position? Because again, we are elevating people into leadership roles based off of their performance, not always based off their leadership. And understand that leadership is a responsibility, and you will more than likely have to change a lot of what made you a great individual contributor to be a great leader. I don't think there's a lot of people that go into leader. I think there's a lot of bad leaders out there. There's a lot of toxic leaders out there. And I don't think most of them go into it trying to be bad leaders or trying to be toxic. What they're not doing is considering putting their team first, making sure that their communication is bringing value, if that's positive or negative, protecting their team, and stepping away from our kind of publicized ideas of what a leader looks and acts and behaves like, and really putting their ego on the back shelf and saying, my primary goal now is to make sure that my team is contributing on a really, really high scale. if you can do that, you're going to be a great leader. It's hard. And so just giving yourself the time and space to really look at like, what is the inventory of skills that got me to this role? And are those the skills that I need to excel in this role? Because sometimes they're not the same. Natalie, over to you.
Yeah. So my final thoughts would be that you really have to do a lot of soul searching and really be blatantly honest and like almost like I can get so honest with myself that it's like almost like if I would say that to anybody else, I'd be like, that was cruel. I would never say that to somebody else but I'm that brutally honest with myself. But then it makes me able to see different perspectives and come to a conversation prepared for that conversation with my team, and really enrich conversations as well. So like sometimes I've had my best training sessions where we did a training and it wasn't the greatest training session and we had to go back and retrain on that same topic. And when we retrained, I was like, oh yeah, because I thought about the analogy that I needed to use or whatever it was. So give yourself that space to have that self-reflection and always ask yourself, if I was my junior, would I be working here still? Because if you would not work for yourself as a leader, like who you are as a leader, then like you probably are a toxic leader and you just need to recognize it. Like, but be brutally honest with yourself. If you really want to be a great leader and you really care about people, be honest with yourself and you'll learn and grow every day. Again, always ask yourself at the end of the day, what did I do well as a leader? How can I improve as a leader? Those are just the two questions I always ask myself at the end of every day. And then I sometimes will do like different purviews of it too, where it's like in the last year, how did I do as a leader? What were my strengths as a leader? What were my weaknesses? Where should I improve at? So, self-improvement, self-awareness, super important to being really capable of taking care of people. So Thanks for hopping on with me tonight, Mac. And our next episode, we have actually new guests. We've been using Calendly, and that has been working beautifully for getting guests scheduled. We have 3 guests lined up already. So awesome. Very excited for that. Cool. So we will be having Eric Cunningham on to talk about hiring entry-level talent.
Ooh,
like interviewing entry-level talent. So I'm very excited for that one. We'll see you back here in a couple weeks. Talk to you later.
Bye.